Hi, everybody. I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about some questions and common concerns that typically arise in our class after week two or during week two. One of the first ones is some of us are still struggling about that difference between genre fiction and literary fiction. Um, and it's sometimes a challenging concept because the lines between the two can be and often are blurred. It's a little bit of blurriness there because something that is genre fiction can have elements of literary fiction in it and vice versa. And we did see that with the story Refresh that we read during the first week, and a little bit also in the super tropey Brazen that we read as well. Our stories don't have to strictly be either genre or either literary fiction. They can be and likely will be a little bit of a blend of both. So what's the primary difference? Literary fiction is character driven and genre fiction is plot driven. And we've had this discussion a little bit, and it sounds redundant because maybe it is. But to kind of clarify just a little bit, in literary fiction, we want the story to be pushed by the character development, not by the action. So in Refresh, for example, we see a blend of both in two very separate moments in that story. The overall story is literary fiction because it is driven by the character's anger. Everything that happens in that piece is in response to the anger the boys have at their absent father. They are fighting each other to be men because they're angry that their fathers are not there and they're at war. They are super angry at the recruiter that's going around and telling everybody about deaths and taking advantage of the wives that are at home. Everything is driven by the anger, by the emotional conflict, rather than being pushed by from this action to this action to this action. And that's at the heart of literary fiction. It's character driven, it's emotionally complex. And again, that's not to say that genre fiction cannot be, it most certainly can be. But the difference is in what is pushing those beats of the story forward. Everything in this piece, Refresh, is inspired by that anger. Okay. But we do have a very distinct scene that is very genre feeling, and that's when the boys go attack the bullies, and then the crater scene. They're very, this thing happens, the characters react, this thing happens, the characters react, this thing happens, the characters react, right? So they're reacting to the action. And the action is driven by the anger, yes. So again, it's a blend of both literary and genre fiction. What it comes down to is just be aware of the motivation of your story. What is pushing your character forward? And it needs to be the emotional complexity, the conflict. They cannot simply be responding to the action that is being thrown at them. They need to be having character growth and development. Um, it doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong in terms of what is the right type to approach fiction. And yes, as we saw with the article that we read, that some people are very judgy about genre fiction, and I think that that's unnecessary, but everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Just make sure when you're doing literary fiction that you can have genre elements in it, but the prime motivation needs to be character driven and not action or plot driven. Another common question that we get asked in this class is, why am I even in this class if I want to be a genre writer? Good question. I literally asked the same exact question when I took this class years ago. I, as you guys know by now, love trashy romance novels. That's what I want to write. That's what I want to publish. It's what I do write. And when I took this class all those years ago, I knew that's what I wanted to write. So why am I taking a literary fiction? Why can't I take a genre fiction class based on trashy romance novels? That would be phenomenal. But the reality is that I learned, and you guys will see, is by focusing on literary fiction, which is focused on character development, we are forced to take a close look at how we are creating our characters and how our characters are emotionally responding to the situation around them. We are forced to focus on the minutia growth within that character. And that, as a result, will make our genre fiction a lot stronger. We're forced to get to know these characters deeply and truly, and how they're interpreting the world, how they are engaging with the world, and not just reacting to it. Now, trashy romance novels are very, very genre. They are extraordinarily formulaic. And if you like trashy romance novels, You know what I'm talking about. And that's why we read them. We want that guaranteed happily ever after at the end. It's our escapism. But like I said previously, you can have elements of literary fiction in your stories. You want to have deep character growth, right? So learning how to approach literary fiction is just another way to strengthen your writing in the long run. So that's why we're taking it. Plus, we get to have awesome conversations and read stories that we maybe wouldn't have ever picked up before, like the Semplica Girl Diaries, which is coming up in a couple weeks. You guys will either love it or definitely not love it. So, it's a good learning experience, and it's another tool that we have in our writer toolbox. What I want you guys to do when you're writing is keep in mind that we're writing short stories. Okay, we're not writing chapters of a novel here. We are writing complete standalone short stories, and we need to be focusing on the moment. That moment can be contradictory, even as I'm saying it. That moment can be a minute, it can be an hour, it can be a day, it can be a week, it can be a year. It's your short story, however you want to approach it. But remember that we want to have the full story arc. The introduction, the conflict, the rise in action, the resolution, right? So we want to make sure that we have a complete story, but we want to also focus on the moment. In literary fiction in particular, a lot of the conflict can be internal, right? We want to pay attention to how the character is driving that story, and that's typically done. We've talked a lot about details. We'll be talking about dialogue and subtext, but the conflict needs to be within the moment too. We don't have chapters and chapters and chapters to get this resolution done, right? We need to focus on what is the emotional drive, what's pushing it forward, what is happening in this moment. And we want to keep in mind that the character drives the story doesn't drive the character, okay? It's a character-driven story. Give you an example of what we're talking about. The story that I'm sharing bits and pieces of throughout this term, it's called Old Friends. It's a piece that I had published. And the primary character, Mavis, is going to a bar to meet an ex-lover. And the entire story takes place maybe 7 or 8 minutes. And it's about 10 pages or so long. And it's got a complete story arc, but not a lot of action. Okay, she literally goes to a bar, meets her friend, has a fight, they leave. But it has its complete story arc, and it's a full literary piece because we're focusing on what's going on in Mavis's life. She's meeting her ex-lover, who's a woman, and she's really struggling with that. She isn't the one that broke up the relationship, so she's really emotionally traumatized over the breakup. And they broke up because Mavis is an alcoholic, and they're meeting at a bar. So the main driving force of this story is Mavis's nervousness. So she goes in, she's super nervous. We're experiencing the bar and how the bar is colored by her nervousness. Her interactions with the bartender, her interactions with her former lover, that's all driven by response to her nervousness. And in the climax of the moment, there's an argument, and so her nervousness transitions to anger and regret, and then it falls back to nervousness because she finds herself sitting in a bar alone, brokenhearted again, with a glass of whiskey in front of her. Everything in that story is driven and motivated by Mavis's response to nervousness. And that's what literary fiction is, and that's what character-driven fiction is focusing on that moment, what is driving that character. So I want you to think about your characters. We spent a lot of time in the past couple weeks getting to know our characters. I want you to put them in a situation. We're going to be talking about place and setting this week. In a situation and have them emotionally react to something. When you're nervous or you're angry, are the two examples we're talking about right now, you see the world differently, right? You might not notice all the details. You might walk into a room and slam that door and not realize how loud that door slam is. So I want you to put your characters in a moment and have them emotionally express what's going on. Okay? Keep in mind with literary fiction, it's definitely okay to have genre elements and vice versa. You will have both, right? And go ahead and blur those lines. Have the escapism of a treasure romance novel in your literary fiction if you want. You can definitely blend both, but remember the focus of this point of this class is I teach English. I have great sentence structure when I'm speaking to myself. The focus here is to create literary fiction. So focus on your characters telling the story. Have them drive the story. Don't have the story drive them. I know that you guys definitely got this, but if you have any questions at all, especially about genre fiction, literary fiction, character development, anything that we've talked about so far, anything we will talk about, or if you just want to ask how the weather is, whatever you want, whatever questions you have, you know how to reach me. You can text, we can chat, we can have an actual phone call, we can Zoom, and we can, of course, talk on the general discussion forums. Don't overthink the difference between genre and literary fiction. It's just, is it driven by the action or is it driven by the character? And you can definitely have a blend of both. You got this. Let me know if you have any questions.